I've got business time. Oh,
we are live. Hello. Welcome everyone to the keynote panel. We did not know we were live, but now we know we're live.
It was a fun surprise.
I think it was a fine segue because it is business time. You know,
super businessy.
Yeah. We also told several times that live was going to be happening soon. We just kind of
ignored it.
Yeah, you know.
It's okay. My name is Benita, and I'm here with some wonderful guests. I have a list of questions. If you have any questions, please put them in chat, and hopefully we'll get to them. But starting with you, Eric, who are you?
Oh gosh, that's a real deep question.
Real deep.
I mean, I guess who is anyone, right? Like we're all just, you know.
So I'm going to do the moderator thing. Let's not derail it. Who are you in relation to board games?
Oh, okay. Much more narrow. Okay. I'm good with narrow scopes. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Yurko. I am a writer and photographer for hand in the right spot. What's Eric playing? Nope. I goofed it. Leaves the stream. All right. I do board game reviews. I do board game photography. I occasionally do some video content, but it's largely not great. And I'm super excited to be here tonight.
Thank you for that. Fritessa, what do you do in board games?
Hi, I am a game designer and I'm a game producer for Funko Games. And yes, nice to meet you.
And Fritessa is not saying this, but she has a game coming out this year. Fritessa, you want to talk about that for like a hot second?
Hot second.
Yes, I have Book of Villainy coming out like Q1 and Wicked and Wise coming out in Q2. So check those out.
And you also have a game called Mansplaining, right? Coming out?
Yes. I don't know when it's coming out, but hopefully also this year. But Mansplaining, yes.
Nice.
That's the most excited I've ever heard someone be about mansplaining.
I know, right?
We haven't played the game yet.
Danny, what do you do in board gaming?
I'm the marketing manager for Pandasaurus Games. That's basically what I do. And have done for a minute now.
Well, Danny's very, very good at it. T, how about you? What do you do in board games?
Lots of things. But I'm probably well known for my Twitter account. I'm the One Tar on Twitter. And then I also am the games channel manager for Haba USA, which is a not so great title to say that I run the games department at Haba USA.
And Daniel, what do you do in board games?
I used to do a lot of things. I've been very good, I think, about limiting myself the last year or so. But I am the director of communications for Long Pack Games. So I help our US clients primarily figure manufacturing out, which is a very, very tough thing, actually. And I also run Tabletop Backer Party, which is a diversity first media organization. And we make all sorts of fun content for hopeful creators and game publishers.
Awesome. And I wanted to shout out everyone in chat. Thank you for watching. We got over 30 people. Mushy Math says to Fritessa, I can tell you how that game works. JK. And Estefania is here. Travis is here. Cece, I'm sorry, I'm messing up your username. Is here.
That's me.
Hello. Oh.
It was Danny the whole time.
5 accounts, right?
Yeah, there was no way for me to know that was you, Danny.
No, I'm sorry. I set you up for failure.
Okay.
Just pulls off the mask. It was me.
I would have got away with it too.
So let's jump right into questions. So this is for Fritessa. Fritessa, when you design and develop a game, how much do you consider manufacturing limits and how much do you push the envelope?
So previously, almost very little, but working with Funko Games, that's like 100% of what I'm considering when I start a game. It's kind of like creating a game based off of a game contest parameters where they're just like, do this, fit it in this size of a box, go. So, you know, I start with where where my budget's at, what we want to include with the game, and then I move from there and see what I can make. So it's a very interesting challenge.
So how about before you were with Funko? How did you keep that? How did you keep that in mind?
So before that, I would always go like, theme first, and then how do I make the theme happen with the components. And I would be very aware of the cost of things because I would have to buy them all. So if it came to making a prototype and I was dropping a little bit too much, then it was just like, is there a way we could trim that down just a little bit? Do we need this many cards? Is there too much fluff in there? Do I actually need a whole T31 calculator? I don't know. So you start to
How else are you supposed to do graphs in the game?
I want that. I want that game now. I want that game that uses a calculator.
I think if anyone could sell me the TI-85 like graphing calculator game, it could definitely be Funko Games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I would buy it for nostalgia purposes. Be like, oh man, now I get to take the SAT again.
The first video game, yes.
Does anyone else want to chime in? I know T that you do some of that with Haba.
I got too distracted by the TA. I was thinking about graph calendars. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
T was just like pulls out the TA-84. I've actually had one this entire time.
So I'll like rephrase the question for you. So when you're helping to develop a game, how much do you consider manufacturing limits, and how much does that play a part of it?
With Haba, I think it really depends on the game's target price point. So that's kind of one of the things with Haba. We look at specific boxes and age ranges and like market gaps. So let's say, for example, Q3 for 2021, we'll say, oh, we need a game, because we make a lot of games and we look at a lot of games from a big publisher standpoint. And so we would say, oh, we're doing 8 releases. We have plenty in this age range, but we really need a game that's like here. And so then once we have that, we can push the envelope with manufacturing and do some really interesting stuff, as long as we know that it will still fit within the price point limits and the age limit and like the playtime that we're targeting for to begin with. So we sometimes have a decision where we start at like this really cool out of the moon, like just really crazy idea, and we try to see if we can manufacture it and then turn it into one of the games in the line. But more often than not, I would say almost all the time, we are going the other direction, where we have a specific thing we want, and then we look to see if we have a design that we can fit into that, and then kind of make it Haba IZ. So we're a little bit different in that regard, just because we are making so many games, and we do have kind of a brand to maintain, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Anyone else? Danny, maybe from the marketing perspective, do you want to add to that?
I can speak to manufacturing. We actually take in the same considerations, right? It depends on what type of game we have. So like a filler card game probably shouldn't be more than $20. But we recently passed in a design that we were pitched that included, for a 15-minute game, 60 custom dice. And we were like, well, this would probably cost $40 for the end consumer. So let's reevaluate that, please. So I think a lot of people don't realize how big of an impact the slightest tweak to a component can make. So that's what we have to keep in mind.
A good point.
And then there's me on the reviewer side just being like, why aren't there enough custom dice?
Literally written in one of his recent reviews. Come on, man.
Why can't I have 5,000 custom dice? I'm over here completely divorced from price entirely, so I'm just like, woo, off into the night.
Yeah,
I get a lot of questions that like, is this possible? And then is it, the answer is almost always yes. It's just like, how much does it cost, and is that feasible for what the market will bear, what your price point goal is.
Yeah. I think it really depends on what you're aiming for with the thing. Also, is my mic volume better? I changed mics.
I think there might be a little bit of an echo, though, from somewhere.
Echo,
Sorry, T.
echo.
I'll never win. I don't understand how there can be an echo because I have headphones on. But, yeah, it's one of those things where with us, how much wood do you put in the game? So we'll have some designs that are very fun, very interesting, but they have like 60 wooden pieces, and they might not be custom, but 60 wooden pieces is heavy and uses a lot of trees. So even it doesn't necessarily even have to be custom dice for it to still potentially become a problem if the game is a smaller price point, smaller time point, that kind of thing.
Someone mentioned in chat, and I wanted to point that out. I bet designing playtesting online instead of in person leads to more expensive components. Have you found out to be true? Or is that too soon to tell?
I do try to recolor everything in Tabletop Simulator to be as gold as possible. So
I can answer this one. No, for Tessie, you go ahead.
I was just saying, at least for our team, we are often making the physical components because while we do a lot of the testing, like say in Tabletop Simulator, usually every week or two we want to print them out and test them amongst ourselves to make sure that some oversight like that doesn't happen, where you end up saying, oh shoot, this actually doesn't work out, because it's still very different testing things physically versus digitally, because the placement of things, like in Tabletop Simulator, you have like this kind of all-knowing view where you can just reach anywhere, and at the stroke of a button you can just peer at things upside down without actually flipping them. So it's very important to print out the components and actually get your hands on them to see how they work. So it doesn't really happen so much that the digital testing affects the physical, but it's definitely easy for there to be oversights if you don't print out your prototype like in intervals.
And how about you, Danny? What is your experience with that?
I was going to say a similar thing about the user interface, having the physical prototype, even if it doesn't have any art or anything, but miming or charading the actions that players will take for, what do the pieces feel like? Can we make them bigger? If we make them smaller to save on money, does it actually hinder the game experience? So playtesting through TTS or Tabletopia helps refine the rules, but the physical playtesting is still just as important. Oh, Tia, you're muted.
Tia, you're muted.
We were just talking about mining.
We will get it right. I'm gonna go to the next question while T's.
I got it.
Oh, there we
Maybe.
go.
Hey! I don't know if it'll be better or not. But I was going to say, I don't know, this is a really fitting story to what Danny was saying with the Tabletop Simulator will help test the game, but not the physical components. We had Norseford. Have you played Norseford?
Yes. Wait,
the ones coins in Norseford are obviously, they did not playtest with these coins at all, and they later came out and said that they were just using standard coins from another game. So when they went to manufacture it, they were just like, oh, this size is good because this is typical. Spoilers, it was not good. I think it was like 4 millimeter size coins or something. They're like the size of hole punches almost, like the part of a hole punch that's punched out. Yeah, so every Norseford expansion that you can get includes replacement coins for those coins. So it's another good example.
Do the expansions include progressively bigger coins?
Sadly not. I've tested. No, they're the same metal coin upgrades. But
the last expansion just has this big coins.
Yeah. I wish. Maybe next time. We'll see. I'll start measuring them. Maybe they're increasing it by a millimeter every time, and I just don't know.
Ooh. That's fun. It's subtle. We love it.
That's just manufacturing drift.
So for Tessa, when you're designing a game, what is one of the biggest mistakes you've made?
Biggest mistakes I've made. I would say.
We can come back to you.
Yeah.
Wait,
Okay.
Have you made 4mm coins yet before?
Yeah.
Or-
Tessa's just thinking, oh no, I just put in a request for 3mm coin.
So how about Daniel? So Daniel, from a manufacturing perspective, what's an example of a situation where you did something too soon, and why did it happen?
You're asking me. I like to break things. I like to be inventor, Daniel. Whenever I'm thinking of game design, part of that is because of my ability to freely interact with my colleagues at Longpack and can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And so if I'm guilty of anything, and you can see this in even some of the latest projects that I was part of, it was very much me being hey, I think I'm going to try this. And then a couple weeks later, hey, that didn't work out, but I'm going to try this other thing. And a couple weeks later, hey, I'm going to try this other thing. It didn't work out, but I'm pretty sure that first thing was a good thing again. And then it ends up being a total train wreck. And I end up at a normal looking box by the end of it.
How about you, Danny? Have you seen that happen where you've done something too soon?
So for our Dinosaur World Kickstarter, we had a pretty good idea of what it was going to look like and how everything was going to unfold and unlock before we even launched. However, it was pretty popular, and we hit all of our stretch goals 7 a.m. on the very last day. But people are obviously not satisfied by having everything you've ever planned. They want more and more and more. So then we had to scramble to get a final stretch goal out of thin air. We did not have a collateral for this millionth dollar stretch goal. So meanwhile, backers are complaining and actually calling us unprofessional for not having thought of this extra thing. So we were on calls for hours and hours on the very last day when we're supposed to be celebrating. And we ended up finding something, but then we go back to the manufacturing cost decision. Is it worth it? Do we appease these backers asking for something more? Or do we just say, nope, that's it. You good job, guys, teamwork. But we ultimately did. It's just tricky, right? Because we could have made the wrong decision and promised something super expensive to us had it sold well. But it worked out. We have a cute Pandasaurus meeple.
Aw, nice. But also, I have to admit, that's a little wild. You have a set limit of stretch goals, and you meet all of them, but they're but wait, where's more?
Well,
It's the new Kickstarter.
As I say, Kickstarter backers are famously muted and reserved when it comes to things like wanting more things. They're just
Yeah,
oh, that's plenty.
Yeah.
Is that your experience?
That has been my experience with every Kickstarter I've run. Yes.
How about you, T? Has that happened to you?
We do sometimes have issues where we do have a process, we have a flow, and then somebody gets a little excited and maybe hits print too soon. So we have had some situations where there was one recently where we decided we really needed the games at a specific time, so we were going to skip. Okay, so backstory. So when you make a children's game, it has to have testing, and technically you cannot receive it into the port of the United States of America to be imported into the country until you have the testing paperwork saying, yes, this product will not kill our children. So what you're supposed to do is you are not supposed to ship your goods until that test happens, and you have that paperwork. Well, there's an ocean between where we ship the goods to where it comes to, and actually there's several oceans depending on which way we're going. And normally we follow all of this paperwork and we do it all right, but there was a game and I was like, no, it'll pass. It has all of the components. We've done this before. It's literally a reprint, basically. Just send it. The paperwork will be fine. Spoilers, paperwork was not fine. the game ended up sitting in the port for an additional 4 weeks while we had to get a rush on the paperwork, because it turns out even though we ordered a specific thing that we had ordered before and we did have testing paperwork for before, they sent us not that thing. So we had to get new paperwork, and it was the last step, and it was just one of those things where it was like, oh, there's a reason we follow this way. Okay. So that was not insanely expensive, but pretty expensive sitting and waiting on a product thing. So I would say there's a lot of reasons why there are processes that exist the way that they exist, and it can often feel like you can cut corners, but really don't do that. Yeah. There's a reason those processes are the way they are, and it's because you never know what's going to happen. So some of the times those processes save you from having games rot in a container ship. You know, yeah. That one's not fun.
Well, that's not great. But also, when someone is supposed to send you something and they send you the different thing that you don't need, so yeah,
they used a different thing that we didn't order, so that was part of it. But yeah, there's it's. I know that a lot of companies have very similar stories to that. Like, I think every publisher that's done more than like 3 games probably has something very similar to that. Like, we thought we could do this, and then it turns out we just couldn't, and it cost us a lot of money. So, yeah, but manufacturing's fun. It's a lot of lining up a lot of things.
So fun.
Lots of dominoes to be lined up to be knocked over just right, and then you're like, oh, this one was just off, and it just, yep. So, yeah.
Well, we have a question from someone in chat. Fool's Card says, do you have any good rule of thumb regarding components for new designers, like number of components related to price? I'm assuming they mean price instead of prize.
I'm assuming too. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like maybe Daniel, I mean, there's so broad of a answer on this.
I usually tell people, especially if they're asking that question, I assume like they're newer, they're not established, and they're making maybe their first game going to go to Kickstarter. I always think about like what is the goal for the design, right? And I think you hear that a lot, but it's always something like would you want this to end up at Target or, you know, on a shelf or whatever at a big box store, or do you want it to appeal mostly to Kickstarter backers? And like those are two completely separate audiences, and what does that mean for your game design? And then you can like let the people who are going to enjoy the thing like guide your component decisions. I usually like, it's very, very, you know, non-answer holistic thing, but I mean, it works. I usually start there with people. Like who's going to play this game, and then what does that mean for the game design?
Yeah, who's the target audience?
Right.
Yeah. So what shelf do you want it on? Do you want it on your friendly local game store? Do you want it at Target? Do you want it at Walmart? Right. Do you want it online only exclusive? Like where? Right. Yeah.
Right. All those are different answers for like who's going to play the game too.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think you could even expand the question more from, like, you can disassociate components and price, right? Lots of games do this where their box is much bigger than the components it holds, but it's a $40 game.
Right.
So it's mostly what is it going to cost you to make the game you want, and then, you know, what will people realistically pay for that? So kind of making those two meet to something successful.
As a consumer, I would like to say it is a pet peeve when the game comes in this big box. The component's going to come in this big of a box.
my pet peeve is always around bags. I'm just like, it used to be, and then I got a bag of bags that are just like all the extra bags that I got from the previous game bags. So I'm just like muttering to myself while rebagging components.
Yes, that many custom dice. So for Tessa, I know you're perfect, but what is one of the biggest mistakes you have made while designing a game?
So I would say the biggest mistake is that I really like to listen to feedback, like all feedback, and that's really dangerous if you are like in the infant stage of your game, because you want to get your game in front of people, but like I get in the habit where sometimes I might run it through the ringer when it still is like its core is being formed, and it'll just go this way, that way, everywhere because it doesn't have a solid place of where it wants to be yet. And so everybody that playtests it will have a different idea of where the game should be. So like not so dangerous when I'm on my own timeline and I have infinite amount of time for my own games. But when working for like Funko, when you have like a deadline and it's just like, we don't have time to go all the way this way, that way, and the other, so that was probably the biggest mistake that I make is I might run my playtest through the ringer before the game is quite ready, just in a need to like get things moving, get things going. So yes.
Well, we can kind of also extrapolate, like, just like listening to like so many opinions, because when you are playtesting, you're listening. So like, for everyone else, like, has other people's opinions on like what you do like influenced like some of the choices you've made?
Oh, for sure. So whenever I run playtests, I have a notebook and I'll write down everything because I don't multitask well, so I'm not going to be like responding and listening at the same time. So I just write down everything they said, and later I'll go back and look at it and see, oh, maybe this idea will work, maybe that idea. But because of that, I take down all of the information, and the best way that I sort through that is by actually doing and letting it fail and see how the pieces work together rather than like theorizing about it in my head. But because I just go ahead and do it, again, the prototype will just go this way and that way, and it never looks the same until it finally finds its core, and we go from there. So it can be harrowing at times, especially when you have a deadline. Because like don't let there be like a contest or some sort of a event, and maybe a day before I decide, what, I'll just play test, just get that good old thumbs up before, and it just tanks. And it's just like, why did I do that? Now I just have to go the next day, and I already know what's wrong with it. But
how about the rest of the panel? Have you like had an instance where you've let other people's opinions on what you're doing influence like your decisions?
Never.
Oh, that's very confident, Daniel.
Maybe you should reevaluate that, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I should. I definitely should reevaluate a lot of things all the time.
Got it.
So we at Pandasaurus, you might be familiar with the game and the two different versions of the game. The original had these, in my opinion, very scary black and red skulls that were just like pressuring you to beat the game, which is actually pretty hard to do. So we made a second version where we redid all the art with Kwanchai Moria's gorgeous take on it. So now it's all rainbows and it's really beautiful, like a joy to play. But that was based on feedback from people being like, I don't think I like the skulls. I don't get a good vibe from them.
That's fair.
yeah, understandable. And then there's also Kickstarter. I'm going to keep going back to Kickstarter because it's a huge part of what we do.
Right.
Inevitably, they share their opinions. And sometimes we do take them into account seriously and make decisions during the campaign. Like with Dinosaur
Dangerous
World.
Game. Dangerous game.
It is a very, very slippery slope. But we work super closely with our manufacturer to get quotes on everything before we agree to make things happen. But yeah, so we do. That's how a bunch of add-ons happened in the Dino World campaign.
We made Animal Upon Animal dinos and unicorns. So once upon a time, some people, because we have Animal Upon Animal, right? And we always have people telling us how cool it would be if we had a version of Animal Upon Animal that was unicorns or dinosaurs. And so we were like, So we did that, and it was really great. And those are super awesome, and they're super fun. And I have a running tally behind the scenes over which one is selling better than the other because we released them at the same time. So I guess vote if you would prefer Team Unicorns or Team Dinos.
Which one is selling better? Are you allowed
Dinosaurs
to tell us?
all the way. Dinosaurs For
I mean,
sure.
I want to know what everybody else is thinking.
I
so
think
that's-
1000% it's dinosaurs.
I think it's dinosaurs too.
I want it to be unicorns though.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, like the
It's
whole dinosaur thing kind of fell off for me when someone was like, "Oh, they like honk like geese," and I was like, "Oh, I thought they were like big lizards." And they're like, "Nope, feathery geese," and I'm like, "Oh, so I'm probably team unicorn here."
Geese
I
are
pretend
very
I didn't
intimidating.
hear that.
Geese are pretty. I don't like geese. At college, we were on a geese flight path, and they were like, they would tell the freshmen at freshman orientation, "Don't mess with the geese." So, but anyway, the answer is I was letting chat be suspenseful and vote. There's lots of Team Unicorns, but Daniel is correct. It is Team Dinos. Team Dinos is dominating. Which is really interesting because in we have another game where it's unicorns and then there's another one that's dragons, and in that one unicorns is winning. So they assumed internally, my team, I ordered the same amount of both because I'm not silly, but internally my team was betting on unicorns because of the success of unicorns over dragons. So I guess this means that
dinosaurs are better than dragons. I think,
that's what
right?
I was
That's
about to
what
say.
that
That yeah, we've confirmed this. Dinos are better than unicorns, and unicorns. We've did science, y'all.
Yeah.
Exo facto.
There's someone in chat that said I totally bought both. So thank you for buying both.
Yes, thank you. I think that was a good. That's Danny. That's Danny. But somebody else up above bought both as well. So, yeah.
I know that Danny's tricking me, and but not that person.
No, that's
Sorry for my
Danny's,
French
that's Danny's
name.
other account, actually.
Danny's just responding to
A
herself.
zombie version. That's really good. We have been thinking of different holiday versions because we did a Christmas one. Which, by the way, there are still like 200 Christmas ones in existence, and then they're gone forever. Let's, hint, hint. But anyway, somebody said zombies, somebody said aliens. I'm for all of these. I will figure it out. Anyway.
How about you, Eric? So I'm sure you've gotten some comments, criticisms on your work. Like, how do you handle that?
Occasionally it's things like, "Hey, bud, you didn't finish this paragraph," and I'm like, "What? I would never." Oh, what? This is what I get for writing at 2:00 in the morning. There are definitely places where people will disagree with the approach that a reviewer might take on a game. I try not to quibble about things like score, because score is a fairly, saying it's arbitrary is bad, but a score is a fairly like personal concept. Like I knew a guy who famously declared that Libertalia was a 4.5 out of 10 for him, but a 6 for everyone else. As though he would come down from the mountain and be like, "This game is a 6," and everyone would be like, "Ah, yes, of course." So that's maybe some criticism that we can safely ignore.
That's fair.
But I think that trying to figure out what your audience is looking for, like, if you let the common denominator determine your content too much, you end up being in sort of the like common area of a lot of people who are doing largely the same thing, and that's fine. Like, there are a lot of good people doing great work in that space, but I would personally rather just kind of do my thing. So I take feedback when it's relevant to areas that I hadn't considered or explored. But if people want me to fundamentally change my approach, I try to evaluate if doing so would put me in a different spot than I'm currently at, and if I like the spot that I'm in. I currently like the spot that I'm in. So.
Okay, I have another question for you, Eric. So, as a content creator, how do you feel like you help with new games and games in design?
I don't really help that much with new games. I hope I don't help with that much with games design. I'm mostly just over here shouting into the void, like, hey, what if there was penguin upon penguin? And like, T is
Where does
like,
that fall? Where does that fall between the unicorns and the dinosaurs and the?
T is like, "Sir, get out of my office."
No, keep talking. I'm just getting the penguins out.
But on the
Perfect.
I love
Those
I
are
love
so
that.
cute.
But I think there's a certain level of like, I don't even say zeitgeist. It's more just like, I'm some guy who has a blog and I write sometimes. I don't necessarily think that people should cater the game that they're making towards me. It's more about me trying to do a good job of figuring out what games I enjoy and why I enjoy them. So hopefully we're not driving too much like individual like industry-wide game changes in terms of like game content. But around things like theme or setting or like inclusion or just colonialism is a bad theme and you should stop using it in your games for free perks. I'd like to think that there's a conversation that we can have there, but that's a lot more about like the way you handle a game as a cultural piece and as an art piece, rather than like someone showing up at my house and being like, yes, Eric, would you like there to be more Penguin games? Because the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah. We have another question in chat saying, how often do you think the initial reception to a new game matches the continued reaction over time?
Same as any artistic medium, I think, right? Like
Yeah.
movies, books, right? The ones that last, there's actually very few, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones that are, we know the ones that are sticking around, generally.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we have we use a term called circle games. So we've got our whole release calendar, but we circle a few of them to be like, yes, these ones are the ones that are going to make it big. Like, we know it. We're going to put a lot of effort behind them to make sure they get that momentum. But they don't always keep that momentum. It's really rare. Like, not every game is going to be a Dinosaur Island. And, you know, I think a typical life cycle, we can tell if a game is going to stick around within 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And even on like the content side, right? Like you play a lot of games. I would even go so far as to say that most, or at least many games are good. Few games are great, and even fewer games are like fantastic. And even a fantastic game may not be to quote Danny, unless a circle game, because it may be a game that's extremely good and topical for the time of life that you're in or the place that you're in. And then suddenly you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I hate social deduction games. And then you just kind of put Avalon in a box.
Never.
You put
Not
that
ever.
box out into the ocean, you shoot it with a flaming arrow, and as it burns, you feel nothing.
I have a new review channel idea.
What is
Anyway,
it?
it's to just do that with every game I don't like anymore.
If we got someone playing taps, I feel like you can really set the scene and also just be like weirdly culturally adjacent to two things at once.
But yeah, so on our side, it's very similar to what Danny says. With us, with publishing, we sometimes even know how long we feel a game will last before we even release it, which can be kind of depressing. Because you want all of your babies to survive and grow up and become butterflies. I'm mixing metaphors, but like sometimes you're gonna release a game that you had a lot of fun and did a lot of fun things with, but when you compare it to other games that are coming out in that same release cycle, either from your own company or another company, it's very easy to see, oh, that one we're gonna get just completely wiped out by this other game. There was, I can't remember what year it was. There was a year where there was like 4 zombie games that launched on Kickstarter all within like 3 days of each other. And none of them had known about the other ones. And it was really just kind of this funny like, oh, that one's doing really good. Oh, the new one's doing okay. And then it was like, people were complaining because like the ones was taking backers from the other. And it was just like this, it was a massive zombie fight. They all ended up funding in the end, but I believe the only one that persisted is I don't like zombie games. This is very obvious. The Cool Mini or Not one.
Yeah.
Homicide?
That one.
Well, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. Right?
That little game.
Yeah.
That one.
But,
Well, that's actually an interesting question. So, for the people who work with the publishers, like, do you all know each other's games that are coming out? Like, I know movies do this. They're like, like, I'm not going to put this superhero movie during this time because this movie is coming out. Do you all to keep that in mind?
I actually try to release one animal on top of animal game a year, but he shows up outside my house and they challenge me to a duel, and so
I've won every time. So
every time. He is much stronger than I am, and you can quote me on that.
I think we're all pretty much unaware of each other's release schedule before we announce anything. Like, we recently announced Umbrevio, which is not really a floral game, but there's flowers on the cover. And another publisher reached out to me and was like, can you tell me about your game? Because we also have a flower game and I want to make sure that it is not the same. And I'm like, no, like, you're reuniting your soul.
Yeah.
It's not flowers. It's fine. But that just goes to show, like, we don't really trade our portfolio until it's shared with everyone else.
When there were physical conventions back in the day, I will say that I definitely have like play tested publishers stuff, and like they'll be like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this Q3 or something like that, but like that's kind of the extent of it. I'll play something and I will play one of our games and we're like, yeah, we're thinking this for Spiel 2022 or something like that, because it's just great to get like another playtesting idea thing. But that's not really like it's more distant from the release time. It's still in the development phase usually. So yeah, more of like the playtesting, what do you think of this kind of thing. On
the manufacturing side, like the more important that release is, like the more likely we're all under NDAs anyway. Like everything, like anything that's more important that like would be important information actually is just protected content, which then well, do what you're gonna do then.
So
well, T, you mentioned in-person conventions. We can't obviously go to them because of COVID. So this is just for everyone. How has COVID affected your role in the industry?
I've had to brush off a lot of old skills in regards to video conferencing technology and streaming technology. From a marketing perspective, it definitely changed how we market games and how we release a game. Also how you communicate with other people in the industry, both on your team and with like your business partners. So I don't have a meeting every month of the key launching months with the key like press and media that I usually interact with anymore. It's kind of like we just do a call maybe once every couple months and we're like, you still alive? I'm still alive. You're still alive? Okay, we're good. I'll send you the games. So instead it was, we would hang out, we would chat, have like an in-person meeting. I would physically show them game components, that kind of thing. So that's changed. How we have those kind of conversations changed. But playtesting has also changed. Taking pitches has also really changed. I am very happy that I am not on the development team. Because I just playing with games I'm not great at development. I'll put that out there. That's one of the reasons I shouldn't be on the development team. But I definitely got into gaming for the people aspect, for me personally. And I think if I had to be playtesting and doing that kind of stuff, I would not be as good at it personally. So just because of the way that I preferred to be the one like interacting with people and stuff like that. So, yeah. This is a linking question from Bill Ward's Brickpile. Are there ways that moving to online has made things better? For example, taking pitches without anyone having to travel. As someone who loves to travel, I do miss the travel. However, I will say that I do enjoy the fact that having these conventions online or more digital does make it easier for us to connect with, well, it makes it harder to connect in a lot of ways, but it makes it a lot easier for us to hear pitches from people who can't make it to conventions normally due to time reasons, work restraints, financial reasons, etc. So that part's really nice. But I don't know if it's similar for you, for Tessa, where if you prefer, if there's something better for like the traveling versus not traveling with online, and how it's changed.
For me, while I do miss conventions, I actually do my best communication online because I'm an introvert. So that's where I learned how to communicate. And so it's better for me because while at conventions, I may meet people and see them. Everyone's focused on like just getting their 5 seconds and going to the next person because, it's a limited amount of time. But with digital playtesting and digital conventions, I'm able to talk one-on-one with a lot more people and make a sturdier connection. So when I'm at these digital conventions and I'm just sitting in the little coffee break room, then I'm sitting there talking to people for hours that I never would be because I'd be nervous in person. But, for me personally, I'm able to make a stronger connection and vibe with people. So I'm kind of living right now with this digital season. And while I am definitely looking forward to, the in-person, but I think that especially coming into the industry so new and not knowing people, that being able to put down these ground roots during this pandemic, I will be much better prepared when we can meet in person and I can actually reinforce those connections. So.
How about you, Danny? How has COVID affected what you do?
So when the pandemic started, Pandasaurus actually paused all of their releases. We had, I think, 8 games left, like from March to the rest of 2020, I had 8 games planned, plus our Kickstarter and everything. And Molly and Nathan just paused just to see how the world was going to work for the next few months. And they shuffled things around, which is how we ended up with 4 games releasing in October. But Umbra Via is actually one that got shuffled around. We had printed the game and had it sitting at our factory in January 2020. So it was ready to ship to the US and go to stores. But we were so uncertain of how everything was going to work. We just sat on it. So it's very exciting that finally is seeing the light. But online playtesting is another big change. It's actually helped us a lot with foreign localization. So translating our games into other languages, specifically in Europe, because it's very expensive to get to Europe, and go to Essen and stay there for weeks in a hotel. So now we can just send them our tabletop simulator link and be like, check it out, let us know. And then we can send you a physical copy. So all in all, much cheaper and arguably faster.
I'm an extrovert, so this pandemic sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
I'm of two minds about it. I had like a very, very consistent travel schedule where I was out of town maybe, every 3 weeks or longer than that sometimes, and like being gone longer on longer trips and longer trips as they mounted up every single convention that could possibly exist. And then what suffered as a result of that was the lack of follow-up. I would have the meetings, they would be great. We would have a great meeting and then like follow up later. But if you're traveling all the time, sometimes that gets in the way, or you're planning for the next trip, that gets in the way. So that flip was good. The bad thing that's happened now is like that initial meeting, the serendipity moment of like, hey, I know you're a manufacturer. I happen to be at this event. I've got this weird thing that I need to figure out. Can you help me figure it out? And like I've done that so many, like at every event that happens, like something needs to be fixed, and those don't happen anymore. And I'm a very like tactile and outgoing person, so I miss those moments. But yeah.
How about you, Eric? How has COVID affected content creation?
I mean, I can't really play most of the games that I normally play, right? So like most of the games that I enjoy are like real-time games, memory games, dexterity games. All 3 of those are very difficult to play by yourself because it turns out in the memory game, by virtue of remembering it, you can't have a different player play because I'm like, all right, draws a card, looks at it, puts it down. Is this the card? Yes.
Fascinating.
Like, don't get me wrong, playing a game by yourself has its own problems, but that in particular, real time is impossible. Dexterity is challenging, but also it just kind of made me want to write less. Like a lot of things became higher priority. Like I needed to worry about like my family. I needed to worry about like California as a whole. I had to worry about a bunch of things that suddenly I was like, oh, I need to temporarily take a back seat on content stuff to make sure that my personal situation is ironed out. And then once I'm in a place where I can actually start creating content again safely and effectively for both my mental health and in some cases my physical health, I would prefer to do that. Thankfully, this is the whole reason I have an emergency like bucket of reviews down like the basement of my site. I'm just like, all right, I can't write anything this week because I am sad. So I'm like, here's some reviews from the review hole. And someone's like, is this from 2016? I was like, shut up.
Read the article.
Yeah, I'm just like, they're like, this isn't terribly topical. A lot of your references are things that are no longer on the air. And I'm like,
niche hobby. This whole hobby is niche. There's some great comments in the. I wish I could click them. Ben says people being forced to play online has made it easier to convince friends to play scheduled games. In a way, more planning makes me less anxious than random game days. And this is really funny because I totally agree with this. I've actually had some more consistent gaming than I've ever had before with friends, even if it's just online. But I still miss random game days. I actually kind of would like those. And then Bill Wards says, in the before times, I was lucky to play test 2 to 3 times a month. Now we can do it every day. Travis Hill, I kind of mostly miss people playing multiplayer stuff, but I wouldn't have made the games that I made without this. That's right. Travis has done like 2-3 Kickstarters, zines and stuff. Cohort says, with so many games, there's always ones that I haven't gotten to in the past 5 years. So they're new to someone. Very true. That's true. Yep. And then Nicole saying, I miss rando game days because there would be things I'd find out and try. And Cohort says they miss random game days with me and Steve, because Cohort is semi-local. So yeah.
Yeah, I will say. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna agree. Like, I miss random game. Like, I do like that. Like, oh, today we're playing like so and so game. I like that. But I also like games where like, hey, I just bought this new game. Can we play? Like, that's how I discovered Castell, which is like one of my favorite games, and like I wouldn't have otherwise. I miss that.
Yeah. That does help me out a bit. That there's a lot of stuff available online, just because it's easier to get other media folks in on looking at similar games, and you can, schedule it out as like, I'll talk to Jonathan Liu and I'm like, hey, I need to play this. He's like, I need to play this. And so we just will play it together and then be like, well,
To chat, Eric is kind of a tyrant when it comes to playing games, though.
I mean, I have a lot of games I need to review. I'm trying to stay on schedule.
This is a great question. What is something you never expected to learn behind the scenes while in the board game industry? Who wants to answer that?
I would say for me, maybe this is obvious, but seeing the legal part, like seeing that legal has to be on the components of almost every piece in a board game. Like, you don't even see it because it's so small. It might be on the foot of your little miniature. And it's just like, somebody has to sit there and make sure the legal is there. Somebody has to actually go in and find out what's the right legal for the right brand and get it on these pieces without like making them look too obvious. And that was something I never expected to find out.
I know all the games we're not going to play.
Oh, yeah, that one's another one. Sorry, I was going to say, especially with IP stuff, like Funko Pop does a lot of IP stuff, so there's legal everywhere on that one.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And what'd you say, Daniel? I missed it because I was talking over you.
No, I think we just like jumped in at the same time. I said that one funny thing that is maybe unique to being in the industry is that we all get to see the things that customers will never see, as far as like the games that are never going to be played, or the versions of games that get tweaked around. Those are actually very cool. Just the iterations that happen.
That's true. Yeah, there's some really cool versions of games that I'll play, and I'm like, this is awesome. We can never make this and sell this to children.
Wait, you're not publishing my copy of Knives Upon Knives? You decided to tell me this now in the keynote?
I thought it was fitting.
Kind of like an offshoot, just about something you learned. So what is one assumption about the industry that drives you insane? Oh, Danny, you should talk. Go for it.
Danny's got one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I felt flames fanning my face. the consumer assumptions of how much components cost and their demands to have certain things. So, oh my gosh, no. The specific component that drives me up the wall is linen finish cards because everyone wants them, but they're not necessarily the highest quality card stock.
Thank you for saying that.
You'll go out of your way as a publisher to source thick, premium paper, and you'll get trashed on BGG for having cheap cards. I'm like, no, you're wrong, and I can't tell you you're wrong.
I live this every day. Linen is trash. I don't know anyone. Whoever wants to hear it, yeah, like cool. I can see like in the glimmer the checkered pattern. Linen is trash. I don't care. I don't care who you are.
You heard it here, folks. Linen is trash.
Linen is more sustainable.
Can I also jump on the I hate linen train though?
Depending how you make it.
Depending on how you make it.
Any card when you're trying to photograph it and it creates additional glare, especially if the glare is weirdly scattered because you have this checker pattern across the card, is usually me swearing somewhere in like the dark of my room, trying to take pictures in the dark, being like, I just want to make a circle of cards. Please, my children are starving.
How about you, T? Is there any assumption that you wish people didn't have?
I mean, people just really, the margins of games and like the true cost of games beyond just the like every part of it, the cost of components, the cost of like shipping, sweet Jesus, shipping, like you're moving games across a segment of land that is not small, and then you're putting them on a boat and you're moving them across an planet, sometimes around the planet by at least half, on a ship. Lots of things like that, and then people are like, why isn't my game here and why isn't it $20 cheaper? Because the world exists, and it is in fact physical and not digital.
It has a finite circumference.
Yes, and we have to go around it. Also, there's like a typhoon, and like, yes. And then when it gets to the country and it goes to the port, there's this thing called customs.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's like, you have to go from that yard to like a distribution yard, and then then you have to go from the distributor to the game store, and just so many things about shipping.
How about you, Eric? What's one assumption you hate?
I mean, a lot of them are already covered. Sorry, I was too busy thinking about linen cards, and then I was off in the weeds on that. I don't know. I get this a lot. Like there's always this there's this like undercurrent of honest reviews that keeps happening where people are like, well, I only want to read honest reviews. And like, well, yeah, like they're like unbiased reviews. And I was like, well, no, that's a review is a form of criticism. A form of criticism inherently requires subjectivity because your relationship to the art piece is changed by your own experiences. And that is a form of bias. What are we talking about? Like, I worry that there's
that was the smartest way I've heard that described. That's really good.
Can we clip that? Somebody clip that. Get on the clipping.
Good. Me just weeping while I'm trying to like learn about art. I'm like, no, but me watching the movie Black Panther may be different than someone else watching the movie Black Panther because my subjective experience changes my relationship to the work. I'm just trying to explain that. It's not like I go to the machine, slap the machine, and it says, this game's a 7. And I'm like, thank you, objective robot. Like, there are definitely games that I've played that someone else has been like, I love this. And I'm like, that's nice. Would you like my copy as well? And they're like, why don't you want it? And I'm like, oh,
I feel like some misunderstandings are like similar to it. To what Danny was saying about the assumptions that are made from customers, but like even more than that, like so like a first-time creator, for instance, like wants to do everything by themselves, And of like, that's like, imagine if like, I don't know, Hasbro launches a new product, like, and there's a whole team around like launching this new product, and you're trying to really like replicate that experience on a public platform, Kickstarter, right? Usually, and you're trying to just do all of the things that, all of the hats that people wear by yourself, and you think you're going to do a good job at all of those things without having any help whatsoever, except for your sister-in-law's cousin's, neighbor who does artwork on the side, and not for a living, by the way. And it's kind of frustrating to hear that sometimes, and then see them still pursue the project without any help.
I literally had to talk my husband out of doing a Kickstarter by himself the other day.
Yeah.
I was like, this is literally my job. This is my friend's jobs. Don't do this to me. Please don't. Like, please don't. Just, Yeah. So.
I'm not supposed to like answer this question as a moderator, but like
please answer it.
Answer.
One of the aspects I hate is that like people always like, why aren't there more like negative reviews out there? Because negative reviews suck to make. And
they do.
And they take way more work, like emotionally, like physically.
And the people are mean.
And they're so mean when you do post it. I did it for one game, and I just got shat on in BGG, and I'm like, never again.
Also, can I just come down from on high with a little bit of numeric data? None of y'all read negative reviews. Like, I have the stats from different reviews that I've written up. Like, people are like, we want more negative reviews. No, what they want is they want me to pick up a game and be like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, and tear it in half like I'm Yahtzee on 0 punctuation. And I'm like, nah, friends, that's not my brand. I don't want to live that kind of life. I want to be like, I really wanted this game to be good, but again, my own subjective experience means that it wasn't quite the game I was looking for these reasons. Hopefully, if you play it, you have a different outcome, because I want you to like the games that you play.
Yeah. Life's too short.
And I do think for most reviewers, like, you can tell if you're going to like the game based on what they say. So I don't need to be negative about it. It's way too exhausting.
Well, there's also sorry. Please.
I had a content creator ask me recently, what should we do if there's something we don't like about the game and we want to address it? And I recommended that they just touch base with me to raise that concern, because maybe there was a specific reason why we went that direction, or why the rule exists, or what type of component we used. And then you could mention that and be like, oh, that makes sense. Or, it's a conversation now instead of just an assumption. And that benefits both parties more.
Yeah. I think Nicole makes a great point in the chat as well. This is, if most reviewers were doing it as a paid job, then a broader range of positive, negative would make more sense, which is entirely true. Like, you're asking people who do this for free as a service to spend more time to get bad view counts and yelled at. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And like, negative reviews are going to happen every now and then, because like, that's a realistic thing. But also, a discerning viewer might notice that certain creators have games that just never get reviewed. Why is that? Maybe they just can't find the emotional energy to write a review of it, because it may not be their favorite game. Some games get cycled in, some games get cycled out. What I really like is I like the creators that go to explain, like, they don't necessarily treat it as a negative review, but they do something like, these games are leaving my collection. I want to talk a little bit about why each game is leaving my collection, and what made me want to bring it in the first place, and then what made me ultimately decide that it was time for it to move on. Like, that's a way to do still that negative review, potentially. It might just be that the game was good, but it wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, or a different game replaced it. But it gives you a different framework by which to address, like, here are some things I didn't like about the game. And that's fine. Like, no one's out here saying you can't do negative reviews. It's just that I think a lot more people feel like that's what they want, and I wonder if that's actually what they want. It seems like they may want vitriol, not criticism.
Oh yeah, they want drama. They want clickbait.
I mean, I love the drama as much as the next guy, but like, I'm just one guy, and writing negative reviews is so tiring.
I mean, you run out of arrows eventually, so it's another part of it. There's only so many copies or arrows you can shoot while they're flaming into your games.
Right. Unless you're doing it specifically by virtue of giving the game a Viking funeral.
You'll go by the
I love this analogy. It's carried on the entire talk, and I'm loving all of it. I just want everyone to know that.
Again, good content creation is weaving a consistent narrative through everything you do.
Yes.
Sometimes it's also taking a joke and being like, we are going to beat this joke until it's funny.
I'm just scrolling back through chat now, and Bill Ward's Brick Piles had a question. If you compare a published game to earlier versions, do you ever feel sad something was removed or changed? Any examples? Anyone want to?
I've definitely.
I'm just trying to think.
I've definitely played games, not my games. Back when I was a freelance content creator / media consultant, I would playtest a lot more games, like a lot more games, because I was just a playtest monkey in addition to being a marketing monkey. I miss those days. But there definitely were some versions of the games where I've played games and then like in the final version, like one of my favorite parts was taken out. And I'm trying to remember, it's the Daniel Solis game that I'm thinking about right now, I actually think didn't even get published, which makes me even more sad. There was something he did, and I really liked the implementation, and then the final version, it was gone. Basically, Daniel loves to cut things I love, so there's that. It does happen.
Daniel's just in the studio. Oh, they're gonna hate this.
Yeah. Daniel's like, so what was your feedback on that again? Okay, that's gonna go.
That's actually just how Daniel does all the feedback. Just, did they love this feature? Well,
it's gotta go. No, we're done here. No.
I like the stories of the development, right? Like, because like what I mentioned before about us seeing the iterations beforehand. I like the story of the game before anyone sees it. Like Throw Burrito wasn't always a burrito. It was many other things before that. And they arrived at burrito and, oh yeah, that would be funny to throw at people. There's like fun things that happen along the way for that game that I like those.
I end up with a weird opposite problem sometimes. Like I've gotten some feedback that I need to update my Oceans review because I refer to gameplay mechanics that no longer exist because they were cut from the Kickstarter final version. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's why it's a preview. I previewed an unreleased game. Like I'm not gonna go change it. I would just write a different review of the actual game. Like there's for not every Kickstarter, right? Like if I'm talking Button Shy changed some card scoring on Sprawlopolis between the preview and the final product. That may not be like a full like review worth of effort, but like there are games that fundamentally change drastically between like the preview I got and like Intrepid or Burgle Bros 2 or Oceans or a variety of games in that sense where they're like, oh, we'll just tweak around this entire mechanic.
Yeah.
I find designer diaries really interesting for this point. Like clearly we're having a great time answering this question and people want to hear about it. So it's a great marketing tool for your own game to keep track, like take so many pictures and notes when you're playtesting and then do a nice wrap up once the game exists fully. So people can go on that journey with you and appreciate what the final product looks like.
And don't delete your old prototypes or get rid of them. Don't override that file. Don't be like, oh, that version's so dead. Like, you never know when you'll want it for a design diary or a museum or, something like that. So,
right.
Your shrine to yourself.
Thankfully, I've deleted all of my old bad reviews. So when they build the Eric Museum, they're not just going to be like, here's his old terrible takes.
There was another question by Fool's Guard. How do you think sustainability into each of your fields and roles, both currently and going forward?
I have a fun one for this one.
Yeah.
So games are physical and they're finite, right? So there was maybe a bit of like industry controversy a while back about what do reviewers do with preview copies, especially preview copies of prototype games when they're no longer a thing.
This conversation is going to start again now because you're talking about it.
It is.
It's just going to immediately.
I apologize in advance. Let me just go straight to the core of it. I don't want to destroy it or get rid of it. So what I did was I reached out to a friend of mine, John Brieger, who does work with the Bay Area tabletop like developer group, and I was like, "Hey, bud, I got a bunch of crates of old preview copies of games, components, dice, cards, boxes. I don't want them. I don't want to throw them away. Can you distribute them to the people that you work with so that those things can get upcycled into new prototypes and like become other things down the line? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I dropped off 4 crates with him, and now they are elsewhere. And so that's like, I think that's a good way to deal with sustainability around prototypes, right? You don't necessarily want someone to be like, yes, this is definitely a full version of Parks and not a preview copy that I got a while back. Winks, $60, please. But like, in the same way with like physical games, there are games that exit my collection on the reviewer side that I don't necessarily want to have around anymore. And so what I do is I do a yearly charity raffle where we'll raise money for Extra Life. And set of the pile of games that you can get is games that we refer to as gently loved or slightly used, I think is a more apt term. And so people can say, oh, this game looks interesting to me, and I got it in a raffle, so I'll take it. And then the games sort of disseminate from there, right? Like it's trying to keep stuff out of landfills.
One important thing for sustainability is like what part of the game ends up in the trash. Right, like think about like when you buy a game, like it's going to stay in your collection or like get sold off third market, right? But like what parts of it are actually getting thrown away? And I think there's like steps being made of like the villainous with the stickers or the card packs that are actually like banded together with paper instead of the cellophane, right? Those are all things that are happening. Like, but the majority of the things that are made in games aren't actually like ending up in a landfill somewhere. They're used forever for a long time compared to other consumer products. We deal with this all the time. We do work with companies to make sure that it is as sustainable as possible. And there's like for each individual component, there is a method to. There's a whole ecosystem of products, entering pristine new. And then like part of the life cycle, for instance, of like a thermoform plastic tray, the cuttings around it actually, part of that gets sold to a bottling facility that then goes to become recyclable bottles, right? You can't reuse, there's something with like a brittle factor and especially with plastics, but you can't like take already recycled material and turn that into a stable thermoformed plastic tray, but you can take the cuttings of one and then build that into an ecosystem that then is recycled. But yeah, there's like for each individual component, you can see this, but the takeaway probably is just that like we don't throw away games, so like there's less of an issue than most consumer goods where you do throw it away, the whole thing.
I wanted to mention, you brought up the villainous stickers. I was still active on BGG forums when this happened, and I remember there was like thread after thread of people complaining that the sticker residue was on their games, and I just remember how upset people were about that, which I found.
You just got to use a little bit of paint thinner, right? Just pour paint thinner on the box, and then that'll get the sticker residue off. I'm not here solving problems.
Someone get a quote of that. Put it on BGG immediately.
Yeah. Thank God I'm moving, because I feel like someone on BGG would try to find my house or something like that.
So another way to be sustainable is optimizing your punch boards too. So this is something we did for Dino World. And there's so many components. So it took a very, very long time to double check that we hadn't forgotten some, because we did forget some coins and someone was surely going to notice. But if you try your best to lay out all of your components, like as many components as possible on one sheet, you're using less punch board, so there's less to throw away, and your game is lighter, so it'll, probably affect shipping in some way. I also don't throw away my punch boards, though. I put them under the insert, so everything's flush.
Yeah.
Which is apparently not something everyone does, but it's
not.
very handy.
It's not. That's like the one hack that when I do it to people they're around, they're like, what?
It doesn't always work, though. It doesn't always work. And then,
It depends on the insert. It depends on the publisher and whether or not they anticipated box lift. And so, like, if there's some games where the insert is designed to, once you've punched it, you can ditch those, and then it doesn't matter. But
or we've done boxes where the like 2 or 3 millimeters like open above.
Yeah. So that when you punch them, you ditch them, and then you're good.
And then it's flush after.
I once got a game where they actually like had like it wasn't like a verbal instruction, it was like a diagram of being like, hey, take your punch cardboard and put it under. Like they actually like told you to put it under, which I thought was so cool because like, you know, I know that, but most people don't know that, and I thought that was really fascinating. But I don't remember which game it was. Maybe,
I want to say that's Plan B Azul.
Oh, maybe. Entirely possible.
I think Plan B did that for a while on their sheets.
Yeah, Skybound did that early on too.
Yeah. For us, Haba has starting in 2013, Haba got certified for achieving and like met all the criteria for having a specific environmental criteria met in Germany for their manufacturing facilities, because Germany has some of the strictest environmental laws in the world. And so Haba is always, they were actually the first manufacturing facility in the country to get these certifications. So it's one of those where Haba's always cared about it from a sustainability point. And when you think Haba and you think wood and things like that, the wood that is used in Haba games is from a sustainably forest, certified, reforested, government-run forest, which is within 150 kilometers of the actual manufacturing facility, because Haba really is one of those where, yes, we're going to use the components as much as we can, have as little waste as we can, but also the sourcing of the materials is super important as well. So getting materials where they make sense. If we have to ship them across an ocean to get to us to make the game, that's not super sustainable. It's a lot of fossil fuels, greenhouse gas, etc. Greenhouse grass. There we go. That kind of thing. Thinking about what's going to be thrown away from a new product. Daniel hit this on the head, like paper bands versus plastic bands inside, paper bags for components instead of plastic bags. Especially if we know that the components, once they're unbagged, people are going to sort them and deal with them in different ways. Like, you know, they've got the bag of bags. Yeah, or they Eric Martin it, right? Especially for us, because our games are meant for small kids. Small kids often, the 3-year-old's not going to rebag each player bag of like components for a game.
You gotta start teaching that early, though.
I mean, you do. We put that in the 5-year-old games if you really want. But so
my
that's
first module backing.
Some of that. The other thing that we do is we do want our games to be, if for some reason our games are very loved, right? They're games for children and families, and maybe inebriated adults and not inebriated adults. But we're very aware that our components and our games, we make them to be as durable and lasting as we can. But at the same time, they're going to need to find a new life. And so with our games, we try to make them as recyclable friendly as possible. And then also at the same time, we try to make them as biodegradable as possible. So it's one of those where like, okay, cool. And also we have children's safety laws and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those where it's like, cool, if you take this wooden piece and you go put it in your garden, you can eat food from the garden. It's fine. Like there's no chemicals. I mean, the pieces we have to have pieces such that a child could literally chew on it and be safe. So it's one of those where we really care about that.
My like very smooth brain was expecting something like, if you put a meeple in the garden, you plant it, you wait a little while, it grows like
it'll grow a tree. That's how you get your meeples. That's how
meeples are born.
That's how meeples are born. You heard it here, the industry secret revealed.
Right, I was like, that seems wrong, but I don't know enough about manufacturing to dispute it.
Can we do that? Can we put seeds?
Wholesome joke.
Can we put seeds in the heart of meeples and then like you go plant your meeple at the end of the game and then you grow a tree? Can we do this?
Oh my god, that would be so fun.
You angry
they can't leave the country that you made it in, but in play.
There we go. We'll do that.
$1 million idea here. If you're in chat, do it.
It's at least a $14 idea.
We have a question for Tessa and possibly others. How do you track versions of a design as you iterate?
So for me, I work in Component Studio, which is from I'm blipping right now, but I work in Component Studio, and I name all my iterations like version 1, version 2, whatever. So I keep those, and I also keep a designer diary because my memory is crap. And in my designer diary, usually I will list like the very detailed notes I took, but also like what were the positives, what were the negatives or the concerns, and then I'll end it off with what are my next steps moving forward. And that's like super important because there are times where you step away from your design for who knows how long, and you come back to it and you don't know where you left off. Like you could spend some hours just trying to get back in the same mindset that you were when you were ready to work on it. So it's very important for me to like really get back in the mindset of that iteration by having that already like bullet points as to what were the big issues that I want to tackle then. So as far as like keeping track of your iterations, that's super important because like file naming is one thing, and that's a whole different skill set in itself. But the other thing is also making sure your mind is in that iteration, because especially whenever you're iterating back to back, you can get confused like mid playtest with the rules from 2 iterations ago.
Yeah.
And you're just like, whoops, like especially if it's like a rules change and not a component change, you know. So it's always good to have like a place where you can look to make sure that you are on the same page with yourself and not on the page with past self from 2 months ago, and you know, have everything in alignment. So designer diary, notes, and iteration numbers in your file organization.
Nice. We're going to start winding down soon, so I wanted to. So you all are on this panel because you're very prominent in whatever field in the industry. But I wanted to ask, how did you first get started? Daniel, we can just go counterclockwise. Daniel, how did you first get started?
Oh wow, I have a storied past. No, let's see here. I worked at a co-working space where they wanted to do events at that space to promote the space, and then I came up with a game night idea, and we started doing like an internal game night that turned into a community game night that turned into like 50 to 100 people a week game night, like covered in the news sort of vibe. And then I rolled that into seeing the very first things that were being funded on Kickstarter while I was studying like what crowdfunding was at a journalism school. And I've like married those two things to then, start writing about best practices on Kickstarter on how you can best fund games. And then I rolled that into a marketing position that like I wrote, like I said, you should hire somebody to do this. And they said, yeah, okay, cool, you do that. And then I did the same thing a year later. I had met a bunch of people in the industry, and then a year later I submitted like to Longpack. I said, hey, you don't have anyone doing this job, but somebody should be doing this job. And they said, you do that. And so now I have that job. So, and then I rolled that into obviously more and more stuff that I do now at Longpack. But yeah, it's very, very, if you want to be in games, you can be.
Yeah. How about you, T?
I started, moved to a new city, didn't know anybody. People in the new city were like, hey, do you want to join our D&D game? And I was like, cool, I've always wanted to do that. And then I joined the D&D game, and then the DM was like, I don't know, I'm not ready. Do you want to play a board game? And I was like Risk? And then they pulled out Dominion. So I was like, oh my God. And it was super awesome. And I got hooked, and I started playing board games a lot. And I started looking for reviews, and I was like, I was obsessed. I was like, I need more games like this one. And I would go online, and I was trying to find something, and I just could not find any like consistent review source that actually would hold my attention. I really struggle. I have an audio processing disability, so I really struggle to watch videos, especially long, detailed, overly talkative videos about board games, with like no visual change at all, because back in the day people didn't understand what a jump cut to B-roll was. So I decided at one point, I'm just gonna make a video that I could actually like stand watching, and it turns out that that video was me wandering around an airport at like 10 p.m. on a Sunday night talking about a board game that I really liked that nobody had heard of. So I did that, and it kind of went a little big for the time. Got like front page of BGG, all this other stuff, and then people were like, you should do this more often, and I was like, okay. So I did, and I would go to conventions and I would vlog and just like offer a perspective that at the time I hadn't seen anywhere for board gaming. The perspective of like, this is what a convention is if you've never been to a convention. This is what these kind of games can be if you've never seen these kinds of games. You can talk about games while visiting a farmer's market. Like, so I made the content that I wanted to see, and that I had the attention span to watch. And then that kind of just snowballed where people in the industry were like, talk about my game. And yeah, at the time I was a software engineer. And so doing like user interface, that kind of stuff, completely not relatable to what I do now. But I ended up getting really into the social media UI interfacing stuff and like figuring out how those interactions worked. And so I started doing consulting work for different companies to help them like build their social media platform. And eventually that turned into enough of a freelance job I could quit my actual day job. So I could do the content that I wanted and then also do freelance stuff. And then that eventually snowballed into the job that I have now. So
where can we watch all these airport videos? Because this was before I started getting into games. Now I want to watch them.
That one is, if you search for the one tar Kings of Air and Steam.
Okay.
Kings of Air and Steam.
Kings of Air and Steam. Does anybody remember that game? I love that game. I got really exhausted and inebriated and played it at BGG 2019, and it was the best decision I've made at 4 a.m. in a long time. So, yeah.
So
The review is very old, but
I know what I'm doing after this panel. Danny, how about you? How did you get into board games or into the industry?
So in college, I worked at a board game store part-time while studying to be a French teacher. So French major, education minor, plan to go to grad school. I eventually needed a second job to pay rent because college. So I went on to my university's Craigslist equivalent, and I saw a job listing for board game customer service. I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. So I applied. Go to interview. I've met the person who was interviewing me. He did not remember me though, because I was a very mousy college student who only wanted to practice my French with this person, my would-be boss. Anyway, it went well. He eventually remembered me when I was like, no, like I tried to speak French to you, but you ignored me. It's fine. You're trying to sell board games. It's fine. So anyway, that was Yellow. I did customer service for them for what I thought was going to be 6 months. And then my grad school program was supposed to start. However, there weren't enough French as a second language high school teacher applicants to run the program. Surprise, surprise. They needed 4. They only had 3. So they're like, we'll pause it. You're accepted for next year. So I was like, okay, Yellow, you've got me for a year. But the same thing happened the next year.
Oh my God.
So at this point, I was like, well, you know what? I like board games quite a lot. And I'd gotten more and more hats, eventually to where I'd had my hands in everything and got a lot of experience. So now I'm not a French teacher, and I work for a few publishers. And
You've taught me plenty of French, for what it's worth.
I translate rule books. I still use my French sometimes.
Well, you also have, the your username on Twitch that Benita's almost recognized.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to see it again in like a week, Danny, for whatever reason, I'm gonna be like, oh, hello, and you're gonna be like, it's me, Benita.
The nice thing is you've now done it so that every possible Twitch username that looks even vaguely French, Benita's gonna be like, is this Danny?
I need to scroll up and like just take a screenshot, being like, hey, this is Danny.
Well, it's a riff on the surrealist painting. This is not a pipe, but mine means this is not a girl because I'm a girl on the internet. So obviously, I don't exist.
That's deep for a username. My username is just a name. Tessa, how did you get into the board game industry?
So I got into the industry kind of in an interesting way because I started my board game journey, or my journey into the hobby, maybe three and a half years ago. And like it happened simultaneously with me starting my game design journey. So I was learning a lot about board games, and like previous to that, I'd only done mass market games with my family and my friends, you know, Monopoly, The Risk, Yahtzee. But suddenly I got exposed to all of these different games all at once. And like, as I fell into that hole, I became aware of the industry in general. And so while I was falling in love with board games, I was also falling in love with just what the industry was, what it represented, because, you know, I met some very welcoming people. And like previous to that, I'm a creative person. And so I always tried to express myself in different ways, whether it was like digital art, drawing, writing stories and things like that. But I never was able to click creatively as much as I was when I started making board games. And because I was introverted, like that was a huge thing for me because I was able to interact with people and, you know, just really kind of come out of my shell through board games. So I say that to say that while I was getting into board games, I was kind of just ravenously eating up everything I could find about it. I was trying to look up things and articles. Like when people say when you love something, you always want to be learning. And I never experienced that until I was in board games. And so I was just at the same time, because I was eating all these things up and interacting with all these people, I was also putting myself out there. I was approached by Anna Maria so I could join Girls Game Shelf, you know, and, you know, I was joining all these contests and just
we started
putting
a
myself
rivalry.
Right. Me and Benita, where I won quite a lot of times. And then I had the BGG diary going on. And like, just, I had all these different hands in the pot. And I feel like that is what helped me get to where I am at Funko Games, because I was just in Atlanta, which has a relatively small board gaming community, and I had zero connections to the industry. But through all of this kind of absorption that I was doing and all this reaching out and these connections that I was making, I was able to, within 3 years, say, I'm moving to Seattle, and then, you know, network and make the connection to, you know, get my resume in front of one of the directors at Funko Games. And, you know, while I had never previously done any game producing that specific title, all the experiences that I had compiled previously from all the little jobs I'd been doing that had nothing to do with the board game industry, they were relevant, you know, like being a PA on a small TV studio, you gotta, you know, put on many hats and you have to just get the job done. And, you know, being the print production assistant at the small little shop, I have to like look at prints and do the quality control and make sure everything is aligned, printing cards, printing components, you know, and like doing all sorts of quality control where like I did for online medical documents. I just sat there all day and I had to stare at the screen for hours just to look for like small details. Like, did they bold the word? Is this a hyperlink? You know, like being able to focus for 8 hours at a time on the most minute details, that was all relevant to like focusing on the game design, meeting the deadlines, and like bringing this huge swirl of things together. So that is how I kind of got into the industry. Just, be passionate about it. If you love it, try it and get involved in it in any way that you can. And eventually somewhere, hopefully you will open a door and that will lead you to, your path within the industry, because there are so many paths and so many ways you can get involved. So.
How about you, Eric? How did you get involved in the board game industry?
So it was a full moon, and it was the.
Stop.
I was waiting. I was like,
I had a lot of time to think of what the opener was going to be. I was sitting here, I'm like, well, there was a man, and I met him at a railroad crossing, and he said, "Now, young man, I've got a deal for you." And I'm like, really interesting. He's like, all the board games you could ever want, and I was like, well, that sounds kind of compelling. I was like, you just need to sign here, and I was like, well, what could go wrong? And so
bedazzle all over again.
Yeah, roughly that. I learned a valuable lesson about reading contracts, and
designers, read your contracts.
Yeah, everyone read your contracts. Please.
Everyone read your contracts.
But no, in a more realistic sense, even though that is probably more apt than the actual story. In 2013, I was a young, impressionable college student playing the hottest new titles like Bang, Catan, and thinking 2 whole board games, nothing will ever be better than this. And so maybe for my birthday, a friend of mine got me Pandemic, and I was like, a board game where everyone can win, nothing will get better than this. And so then I picked up, I think at one point I had Pandemic, Bang, Catan, and I want to say Avalon. I think that was the 4th one. And then I went on to Reddit because I was like, wow, I'm really into this board game thing. I should go talk to other friendly online internet people.
Ooh.
And so I made several poor choices there. Got onto board game Reddit and was like, hey, Reddit people. Now, I'm a young, enterprising individual who owns 4 entire board games, and that's the most I could ever need. But if I wanted to get maybe another board game, what board game should I get? And so that happened. Then I left college, and I'm like, 15 whole board games. Who could ever need more than this? And so, like I said, some Faustian deals were involved. But I had a bunch of free time once I left grad school, and I was like, I should probably find something to do that isn't work. He said, again, you, the audience, understand the dramatic irony of me saying I need to do something that isn't work and then creating an entire job for myself. But when a friend of mine advised that I maybe get into writing or something creative that I can own wholly, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun, but what would I write about? And she's like, what do you like? And I was like, well, I have like 15 board games. I feel like that's the most I'm ever going to need. Really and my friend's like, you keep saying that. And I was like, I feel like it's never going to be relevant, but it's nice to just get it out there. So writing about board games, I ran into a weird problem when I was doing my first review, which was basically, oh, I have this game Catan, and I need photos of Catan, but something tells me that I can't just go online, Google Catan, and then just take the first 15 photos I find, because that seems shady for some reason, possibly not great in terms of copyright. And so me, again, an enterprising person who happens to have, actually, it's still plugged in, this DSLR, handy, to give you a sense of how my office is laid out. I was downloading photos the other day. Whoops, too much. We're doing what we can. But so I was like, oh, I'll just take my own photos. And then we kind of snowballed upwards from there. As with all things that eventually increased in complexity, and my deal came true. More board games than I would ever know what to do with.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a finite amount of time to process them. So it's been a fun, wild ride. I still enjoy the writing. I still love the photography aspect of it. But I think that thinking through like the way that we play games and how our relationships with other people influence the games that we play and the games that we enjoy is something that I really like about the act of game criticism. And it's something I also want to think more about as I'm revisiting how to change my content moving forward, where I want to be content-wise and personally in several years, right? Just thinking about like, what is there to say about board games that hasn't already been said? I try to read other reviews of other mediums because there's like, if I want to read something like a little pretentious, I'll go on Pitchfork and look up some albums. Like, I like Pitchfork, but like, it's Pitchfork. there are some people who have this ability to describe a show or a concert or an album in a way that is transcendent. Like, it just really makes you understand the flow of the music and how the music affected them as a listener. And I'm like, I wish that I could write like that to convey my experience playing the board game. And I'm giving a lot more thought to that and how I want to write in those spheres. But that's something I found really interesting lately, is just like, how do film criticism, music criticism, art criticism, even art history, like how does that stuff inform the way that we think about the content we create and the content we consume? And where can you move forward with that? And that's just kind of, that's what's rattling around the old brain cage these days.
I feel like Eric just like tricked us into a philosophy lesson. Like, he started with like a really, really, fun opener.
That's
and
Eric.
Just, like, dove
That is
into
Eric.
like down the rabbit hole.
That's Eric. That's
just-
Eric's reviews. This is one of the reasons why Eric is one of the few reviewers I will like read their
I'm
stuff
just
on.
one single hand coming out of the swamp, grabbing your ankle and be like, hey, buddy, let's talk about board games, how the content we create is a reflection of the content we consume and also a reflection of our own identity. And you're like, no, don't want that.
I just want to know about Monster Dentist. No.
And I'm like, it tells you things about how we process things.
I just want to roll the math rocks.
I just, like I said, it's something that I'm really interested in because there's so many different aspects of a game that are considered art in their own way, right? Like, rule books are an art form because they're instructive, like they're written content. Like, even how to play videos, different type of art, also worthy of criticism in its own right. The way we think about like game art, card art, box art, even things like rulebook art and rulebook art orientation are interesting. The way we think about like, oh, how does the box display? So like, are you going for a consistent color scheme so you can have like a branding identity? Like, say, oh, I don't know, Haba? Are you going for a game that has its own like flavor of box cover? So like, I'm looking at brass behind Danny and I'm thinking a lot about like, how does that compare to a Haba box? How does it compare to Sleeping Gods, which is on this side of me? One day I'm going to catch that pesky left and right and I'm going to make them sorry. I'm rambling, but it's something I'm really interested in, is that like, I want people to take the criticism of board games seriously, because it's a serious industry, right? We've got 5 people on this call and me. The 5 people who aren't me are working really hard to change the way that y'all and that they think about play, think about interaction, think about art, and think about the end-to-end process of creating stuff to get it to you. And that's worth talking about, and that's worth taking seriously. So my job and my hope on my end is that I can help elevate that conversation so that people can take it more seriously and we can think about how that drives the industry moving forward.
Also, I want to throw a burrito at somebody at some point.
Absolutely. Like, have we not told you about Monster Dentist?
What?
Like Monster Dentist.
No, Monster Dentist is amazing.
It's seriously, you have a little monster face, and inside of it, there are like teeth cards, and you use little dental mirrors to stick the dentist mirror inside the monster mouth and try to see what's on the teeth. Are they good teeth? Are they bad teeth? And then you have to quickly assemble like.
Is this a real product?
Yes.
Are you
Korea board games.
Yes.
Hold on.
This is a real product, and it is like
Monster
kind of like
Okay,
creepy,
just
but like not. It's yeah.
All right, here we go. Found it. Monster Dentist.
Wow.
Very cool.
Interesting.
Korean. It's a Korean game.
Yeah.
Korea board games. It's got, you just, it's upside down.
Well, Eric is no longer my friend after that one. Your box lid cover doesn't match the back. Ugh.
How dare!
How
How
dare
dare!
you?
I'm just a man.
Well, we're gonna start winding down, so I want to say, where can everyone find you? Eric, go first. Where can people
Really?
find you?
I'm literally. Ugh. Fine. Okay. So in real life, you can almost certainly not find me at this exact location because I am moving next week to a different location. Good luck, jerks. But on the
BG
internet,
crowd is on the case.
the BG crowd's like, I put paint thinner on my board game because the man on the internet told me to, and I'm like, well, time to break my lease, flee forever. So the places you can find me online at what'sericplaying.com, Instagram.com/what'sericplaying, and Twitter.com/what'eplaying. I do not guarantee that the content on Twitter.com/what'eplaying is any good. I get into a lot of conversations about Sonic the Hedgehog.
And Pokemon.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Pokemon. I have a
Pokemon.
lot of opinions. I don't have a lot of taste. So that's a dangerous combination on Twitter.com.
For Tessa, where can people find
I'm
you?
going to put these.
Really simple. You can find me at @fortessa, and it's spelled just like my name. And that's pretty much at Twitter and Instagram, but the Instagram's really just going to be about my puppy. So I suggest Twitter, and I will get all my game updates there.
Danny, where can people find you?
You can find me at Pandasaurus everywhere. If you talk to Pandasaurus, you're talking to me. But if you'd like to talk to me for real with no pandas or dinosaurs, you can find me at Danny Below, BELOW, everywhere. Except Twitch, where I'm in French.
Yeah. T, where can people find you?
I'm everywhere at the one tar, but I'm most active on Twitter. My Facebook is just since the channel, my YouTube channel is still up. It still exists, but we don't really post a lot there anymore. So same with my Instagram. I got too addicted to Instagram, man. That family of dogs living in the van in the desert, I just couldn't even. So I'm not on Instagram actively anymore, but Twitter is the best place to find me. So, yep.
And Daniel, where can people find you?
That's a good question. Long Pack Games, so like Twitter, Long Pack Games, or the Facebook page for Long Pack Games. If you want to talk to me and not talk to any, what was it, dinosaurs, then I usually hang out in Kickstarter board games. It's a Facebook group. Other than that, yeah, I think that's good. Yeah. That's the public personas that I want to publicize.
That's fair. And I'm Benita. You can find me at Twitch, where I stream video games, board games, and I have a Just Chatting stream. And you can also find me on TikTok, where I usually do board game meme videos, and they're lots of fun. Well, I like to think they're fun anyway. And you can find me on Twitter. And so thank you, everyone, for joining. We had some great questions. So yeah, I don't know how to end.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
you gotta end
don't forget.